6 degrees below zero, and the diesel wouldn't turn. I stood in the pre-dawn dark, breath hanging like ghosts in the barn light, my bare hand burning against the frozen metal of the tractor hood. The wind cut through the cracks in the barn walls with a whistle that sounded almost human. Livestock breath rose in clouds from the stalls. I pulled my father's old leather work gloves from my coat pocket, 40 years old, patched at the thumbs, and worked them onto my hands, the stiff leather crackling in the cold. The town hall had been overheated, too many bodies packed into folding chairs. I'd sat in the back row during the agricultural zoning meeting, watching Kyle Masterson point at his expansion maps with the confidence of a man half my age who thought he owned the future. Then Diane walked in late, touched his arm, leaned close. Their laughter cut through the room's murmur. I caught just a fragment as I stood to leave. After the baby comes, we can finalize. The room went silent. Every eye found me. I nodded once, the way you do when you've been a farmer in the same county for 67 years, and walked out into air so cold it felt clean. I drove home slow, headlights cutting tunnels through falling snow. In the rearview mirror, the lit doorway of the town hall framed them both, still talking. On my passenger seat sat a pair of work gloves, women's size, the ones I'd given Diane on our wedding day. I'd found them in the barn trash that morning. She hadn't worn them in years. Inside the house, every light was off. Diane was at book club. I hung my coat on the hook by the door and saw her desk drawer slightly open. She was always so careful about closing things. I pulled it wider. The insurance beneficiary form lay on top, already filled out. Where it had said Josie Brennan, daughter, someone had crossed it out in blue ink. The new name, Diane Brennan, sole beneficiary. The date at the bottom was 3 weeks old. Right when she'd started talking about our future at breakfast, smiling over coffee like we were newlyweds again, I folded the paper carefully, creased it twice, and slid it into my shirt pocket. Then I walked back out to check the fence line. A smart man gathers ammunition before he fires. Morning came the way it always does on a farm, early and unforgiving. 4:30, the alarm clock's buzz cutting through the dark like a chainsaw. I dressed in the cold bedroom, Diane still asleep or pretending to be, and headed down to start the coffee. The kitchen smelled like yesterday's dinner, something with garlic she'd made and barely touched. I filled the percolator, listened to it hiss and bubble on the stove, and stared out the window at snow covering everything in blue-gray light. The cows needed feeding, the water troughs would be frozen. The fence posts along the back 40 had been leaning since the ice storm in December, and I'd been meaning to get to them. Work doesn't stop because your wife is planning to take everything you've built and sell it to the highest bidder. I poured coffee into a thermos, pulled on my Carhartt, and walked out into air that hurt to breathe. The snow crunched under my boots with that particular squeak that only happens when it's cold enough to freeze spit before it hits the ground. The barn loomed ahead, dark except for the single bulb I'd left burning overnight. Inside, the livestock shifted and lowed, their breath mixing with the smell of hay and manure and old wood. I fed them, checked the water, had to break ice with a hammer, and stood for a moment with my hand on the nearest stall post. My grandfather had built this barn in 1947 with lumber he'd milled himself. My father had raised me in this barn, teaching me that a man takes care of what's his. And now Diane wanted to pave it over for a truck stop. The insurance form was still in my pocket. I could feel it there. A small weight that somehow pressed heavier than the hammer in my other hand. By 7, I was in town. Tucker's Feed and Supply sits on Main Street, a low brick building that's looked the same since Eisenhower was president. Ray Tucker's been running it for 40 years, ever since he came back from Vietnam and decided he'd seen enough of the world. The bell over the door jangled when I walked in, and the smell hit me. Grain dust and coffee and motor oil and the faint tobacco scent that clings to old men's coats even years after they quit. Ray looked up from behind the counter, a coffee pot in one hand. "Early for you, Walt." Couldn't sleep. He poured without asking, slid the cup across the scarred wood counter. 3 other farmers sat on stools near the window, men I'd known for decades. They nodded. I nodded back. I took a sip. Ray's coffee always tastes like it was made in 1952 and reheated every day since, and said quiet enough that only Ray could hear, "Tell me about Henderson's place." Ray's face didn't change, but his hands stopped moving. "What do you want to know?" "Why he sold." "He didn't sell, Walt. He lost it." Ray leaned against the counter, voice dropping lower. Kyle Masterson sold him equipment on a loan. Terms looked good on paper, but there was a clause, fine print about payment schedules tied to market prices. When corn dropped, Henderson couldn't make the payments. Kyle foreclosed, bought the land at auction for half what it was worth. Now he's got 60 acres, and Henderson's living with his daughter in Green Bay. My hand tightened around the coffee cup. How many others? 3 that I know of, all of them over 65. All of them trusting Kyle because he seemed like a nice young man who just wanted to help. Ray pulled a rag from his pocket and wiped the counter, though it didn't need wiping. Walt, I've been hearing things. Diane's been in here twice in the last month asking about land values. What farms around here might sell for. I didn't think much of it then. I set the cup down carefully. She's been in here? Looking at pamphlets for realtors, asking about developers. The bell jangled again, someone leaving, and cold air swept through the store. I could hear the country station playing from the radio on the shelf. Something about lost love and highways. One of the farmers coughed. Ray, if someone wanted to protect their land, make sure it didn't get sold out from under them, how would they do it? Ray looked at me for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone, scrolled through contacts, and wrote a number on the back of a receipt. Linda Chen, attorney, she helped my cousin when his kids tried to force him into a home. She knows agricultural estate law better than anyone in the county. I took the receipt, folded it, put it in my pocket next to the insurance form. Ray leaned close. Walt, you're not the first old farmer Kyle's circled, and Diane's been in here asking about land values. Sunday dinner at the farmhouse used to be something I looked forward to. Now it felt like sitting down to a meal with strangers who happened to know where I kept the silverware. Josie had driven up from Madison, her 10-year-old son Michael in tow, and she'd brought a roast that filled the kitchen with the smell of rosemary and garlic. She moved around the kitchen like she still lived here, knowing without asking where everything was kept. Diane arrived late, of course. I heard her car in the driveway, the engine ticking as it cooled, and then she was in the doorway, pulling off her coat. She'd done something to her hair, lighter, more styled. New perfume, too, something floral that didn't belong in a farmhouse. Sorry I'm late, she said, kissing Josie on the cheek. Traffic. There's no traffic between here and town. It's 12 miles of county road. We sat down, me at the head of the table, where I'd sat for 32 years, Diane at the other end, Josie and Michael on the sides. Pastor Mitchell had stopped by, bringing his wife Eleanor, and they filled the space with the kind of cheerful small talk that people use to cover up the fact that nobody's saying what they're really thinking. The roast was good. I said so. Josie smiled. Michael asked if he could see the new calves after dinner, and I told him yes, if his mother said it was okay. Diane pushed food around her plate, barely eating, checking her phone twice before Josie gave her a look that made her put it away. Then Diane cleared her throat. I have some news. She looked around the table, letting the moment stretch out. We're expecting. The room went silent, except for the tick of the old clock on the wall. Pastor Mitchell's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Eleanor made a small sound, something between a gasp and a laugh. Josie's face went very still. Well, Pastor Mitchell said, recovering first, setting down his fork. Well, that's wonderful news, Diane. Congratulations to you both. He reached across the table to shake my hand. I took it, felt the pressure of his grip, the expectation in his eyes. I smiled. I've been smiling through difficult things since before he was ordained. Wonderful, I said. Eleanor started asking questions. When was she due? Had she picked out names? Would this be her first? And Diane answered each one with the practiced ease of someone who'd rehearsed this moment. August, she said. Late August. No names yet, too early for that. Yes, her first. I did the math in my head. Late August meant conception in late November, early December, right around the time she'd started spending long evenings in town, coming home with shopping bags and excuses. Josie caught my eye across the table. She knew. I could see it in the way her jaw tightened, the way her hand paused on her water glass. My daughter's always been sharp. She got that from her mother, my first wife, the one who died of cancer 35 years ago and left me raising a 7-year-old alone, until I made the mistake of thinking Diane could fill that empty space. Dinner ended with pie and coffee. People congratulated us. Pastor Mitchell suggested we come to church next Sunday, let the congregation celebrate with us. Diane smiled and said, of course we'd be there. I nodded and drank my coffee and thought about insurance forms and land values and the way Kyle had looked at those expansion maps like he was already counting the money. When everyone finally left, Pastor and Eleanor with warm hugs, Michael reluctantly after I promised him a tractor ride next visit, Josie lingered by the door. Dad, I need to grab something from the barn. Walk with me. We stepped out into the cold. The sun had set while we were eating, and now the temperature was dropping fast. That particular winter cold that makes your teeth ache. Our breath hung in clouds between us as we walked across the yard to the barn. Inside, she turned to face me. When did you have it done? Have what done? Dad. Her voice was soft but firm. The procedure, the vasectomy. When? I leaned against the stall door. 2009. After the accident with the baler, doctor said I was lucky I didn't lose more than I did, but the damage was enough that he recommended it, easier than risking complications. Did you tell Diane? Never came up. We weren't trying for kids. She never wanted them. Said she was too old anyway. Josie pulled her phone from her pocket, typed something, showed me the screen. Late August due date means conception around Thanksgiving. You were gone that whole week at the Veterans Convention in Milwaukee. I looked at my daughter. She'd inherited her mother's eyes, dark and honest. Yeah. Then we have options, Dad, but we need a lawyer. Today. The barn was warm compared to outside, but I felt cold all the way through. From somewhere in the darkness, one of the cows shifted and lowed, a sound like a question nobody could answer. Josie put her hand on my arm. She told everyone you're the father. That baby makes her family forever, Walt, even if you try to cut her out. Monday morning, I drove into Eau Claire with Josie in the passenger seat. Michael was at school, and Josie had taken a personal day from the veterinary clinic. The roads were clear but slick in patches, black ice hiding under a thin glaze that caught the light wrong. I drove slow, both hands on the wheel, while Josie stared out the window at fields covered in snow. You don't have to come, I said. Yes, I do. We didn't talk much after that. The radio played farm reports and commodity prices, familiar numbers that used to mean something. Now they just felt like noise. Linda Chen's office was on the third floor of a brick building downtown, the kind of place that smells like old radiator heat and floor wax. A secretary with gray hair smiled at us from behind a desk stacked with folders. Mr. Brennan, Ms. Chen is expecting you. Linda was younger than I'd pictured, maybe 52, 53, with black hair pulled back and reading glasses on a chain around her neck. Her office had 2 walls of law books and a window that looked out over the courthouse square. She shook my hand, then Josie's, and gestured to the chairs across from her desk. Ray Tucker called me Saturday, she said. Told me I should make time for you today, that it was important. He didn't give details. I pulled the insurance form from my jacket pocket, unfolded it, and slid it across her desk. She picked it up, put on her glasses, read it without expression. Then she looked up at me. When did you discover this? Thursday night. She left it in her desk drawer. And the beneficiary was changed from your daughter to your wife without your knowledge? I never authorized any change. Linda set the form down, pulled a legal pad toward her, and started writing. Tell me everything. Start from the beginning. So I did. Told her about the town hall meeting, Kyle's expansion plans, the pregnancy announcement at Sunday dinner. Josie filled in details I'd forgotten. Diane's trips to town, the new clothes, the way she'd been distant for months. Linda listened without interrupting, making notes in handwriting so neat it looked typed. When I finished, Linda sat back in her chair. It creaked softly. Outside the window, I could hear a siren in the distance, the sound of traffic on wet streets. Mr. Brennan, I need to ask you something personal. Is there any possibility that child is yours? No. You're certain? Had a vasectomy in 2009, medical necessity after a farm accident. Linda's pen paused on the paper. Do you have documentation? Medical records should still be at the clinic. Good. We'll need those. She flipped to a new page on her pad. Now, about your assets. You own the farm outright? 280 acres. Been in my family 4 generations. Any mortgages? Paid off the last one in 2015. And your will? How is the property distributed? I glanced at Josie. That's the thing. Last July, when Josie was going through her divorce, she needed help. Legal fees, starting over. I wanted to do something more than just loan her money, so I transferred 51% ownership of the farm to her. Agricultural family exemption allows it, tax-free, if it's going to immediate family who will work the land. Linda's pen stopped moving. She looked up at me, then at Josie, then back at me. You transferred majority ownership 6 months ago? Yes, ma'am. Documented and recorded with the county? Linda Chen handled it, Josie said quietly. Different Linda Chen, down in Richland County. My divorce attorney recommended her. Linda leaned back, and for the first time since we'd walked in, she smiled. It was small, barely there, but it was real. Mr. Brennan, you accidentally checkmate your wife. She can't touch that farm. Even if she contests the will, Even if she claims that child gives her standing, she doesn't have majority control. Your daughter does. The relief hit me like a wave, but it was mixed with something else. Something that felt like standing on ice too thin to hold your weight. So the farm is safe? The farm is safe, but we still have other problems. This insurance form, if she forged your signature, that's fraud. And if she's been accessing joint bank accounts or taking out loans in your name, we need to document everything. She pulled a business card from a holder on her desk and wrote something on the back. I want you to pull every financial record you have. Bank statements, credit card bills, loan documents. Bring them to me by the end of the week. What about Diane? Josie asked. Right now, she doesn't know you know. That's your advantage. Linda looked at me over her glasses. Walt, this isn't just a divorce anymore. This is financial warfare. Are you ready for that? I thought about my grandfather clearing land with a mule and a plow. I thought about my father teaching me to fix a fence line in a blizzard. I thought about the barn my family had built with their own hands and the woman who wanted to turn it into a parking lot. I'm ready. Linda nodded once. Then let's get to work. Outside, the February sun was weak and pale, barely warming anything. Josie and I walked to the truck in silence. When we got in, she turned to me. Dad, she doesn't know it yet, but she already lost. The temperature dropped again that week, down into the single digits, the kind of cold that makes everything brittle. I spent my days doing what needed doing, feeding livestock, breaking ice on water troughs, checking fence lines. Diane spent hers in town, or at least that's where she said she was going. She'd leave after breakfast and come back at dinner, smelling like restaurant food and that wrong perfume. We didn't talk much. Hadn't for months, really, but now the silence had weight to it, like something physical sitting between us at the kitchen table. Thursday afternoon, I was in the barn working on the tractor, trying to get the engine to turn over without sounding like it was dying. The smell of diesel and old grease filled my nose, and my hands were black with oil despite the gloves. I heard a truck pull into the driveway, not Diane's car, something bigger, and straightened up to look out the barn door. Kyle Masterson climbed out of a silver F-250, the kind with all the chrome packages and dealer plates still in the back window. He was wearing a quilted vest over a button-down shirt, dress boots that had never seen real mud. 41 years old, and walked like the world owed him something. He saw me and headed toward the barn, hands in his pockets. I wiped my hands on a rag and stepped out to meet him halfway into the cold afternoon air. My breath hung between us like a challenge. Walt, he said, like we were old friends. Got a minute? I'm busy. This won't take long. He looked past me at the barn, at the farmhouse beyond. Nice place you got here. Must be worth a lot. Not for sale. That's not what I hear. He pulled his hands from his pockets, crossed his arms. Look, I'm going to be straight with you. Diane and I have been talking about the future. Her future. And she's tired, Walt. Tired of playing farmer's wife, tired of scraping by. She wants more than this. Then she can leave? It's not that simple. He took a step closer. I held my ground. That baby she's carrying? That makes things complicated. She's going to need support, security. And you're what, 67? How much longer are you planning to work this place alone? The wind picked up, whistling through the gap in the barn door. Somewhere inside, one of the cows lowed, a low sound that echoed. You need to leave my property? Kyle's jaw tightened. I'm trying to help you here, old man. My company's expanding, and this land is perfect for what I need. I can offer you fair market value. More than fair, actually, and you can retire somewhere warm. Diane gets her fresh start. Everybody wins. Except, I lose everything my family built. Your family? He laughed, short and sharp. Walt, your family's just you. Your first wife's dead. Your daughter lives in Madison and doesn't give a damn about this farm. Diane's your family now, and the baby she's carrying. You really want to fight that in court? Because I've got lawyers, Walt. Good ones. You've got dirt under your nails. I looked at him, really looked at him, at the confidence in his stance, the expensive truck behind him, the way he'd probably practiced this speech in the mirror. He thought he'd already won. Get off my land. His smile faded. You're making a mistake. Won't be the first time. He stood there a moment longer, then shook his head and turned back toward his truck. I watched him go, watched him climb in and reverse down the driveway, gravel crunching under his tires. The house door opened. Diane stood in the frame, wrapped in a coat I didn't recognize. She'd been watching from inside. She walked out to where I stood, her breath making clouds in the cold air. What did he want? To buy the farm. And I told him no. Her face hardened, something cold settling behind her eyes. Walt, we need to talk about this, about our future. There's nothing to talk about. Yes, there is. She stepped closer. I'm pregnant. I'm going to have a baby. Your baby. And I can't raise a child here. In this, she gestured at the barn, the fields, the whole of it. I need more than this. Then leave, but the farm stays. That's not how this works. Wisconsin is a marital property state. I'm entitled to half of everything, including this land. I looked at my wife, at the stranger wearing her face, and felt something break inside me, something that had been cracking for months. That baby isn't mine, Diane. She froze. What? I said it's not mine. Of course it's yours. Don't be ridiculous. I had a vasectomy in 2009, so unless you're claiming a miracle, that child belongs to someone else. Her face went white, then red. You're lying. Medical records don't lie. She took a step back, then another, her hand going to her stomach in an instinctive gesture. You're trying to trap me. You're trying to make me look bad so you can keep everything. I'm trying to protect what's mine. This farm isn't yours. Her voice rose, sharp and brittle. It's a prison. I've given you 32 years, Walt. 32 years of smiling at church and pretending I'm happy living like it's still 1950. I'm done. Kyle can give me a real life. He can give me freedom. Then go be free. But this land isn't coming with you. The wind picked up harder, scattering loose snow across the driveway. Diane wrapped her arms around herself, shivering, and I realized she wasn't wearing gloves. Her hands were bare and pale in the cold. You'll regret this, she said quietly. I regret a lot of things. This isn't one of them. She turned and walked back to the house. I watched her go, then turned back to the barn. The sun was already setting, the sky going pink and orange over the tree line. The temperature would drop below 0 tonight. There was a heifer due any day now, and she'd been showing signs of distress all week. By midnight, the blizzard hit. I'd been checking on the pregnant heifer every few hours, and when I went out at 11:30, I found her in active labor, the calf positioned wrong. I could see one hoof, just one, and I knew immediately we had a problem. I ran back to the house, snow already 6 inches deep and still falling. Diane, I need help in the barn. She was sitting on the couch, watching something on her phone. She looked up at me, snow melting on my coat. What? Heifer's in trouble. Breech birth. I need an extra pair of hands. She looked back at her phone. I can't. I'm pregnant, Walt. I can't be around that. A calf is dying. Then call a vet. The vet can't get here in this storm. Roads are already drifted shut. She stood up, wrapped her bathrobe tighter. I'm done pretending, Walt. I'm done pretending I care about this farm, about these animals, about any of it. Call Josie if you need help. Call Ray. Call anyone. I'm not going out there. I stared at her for a long moment. The wind howled against the house, and somewhere in the barn, the heifer bellowed in pain. Fine, I said. I went back out alone. The barn was warm compared to outside, but not by much. The heifer was down in the straw, her sides heaving, eyes rolling white with fear and pain. I knelt beside her, stripped off my coat, rolled up my sleeves. My hands were shaking, from cold, from anger. I couldn't tell anymore. I worked for an hour, maybe 2, lost track of time. The calf was turned wrong, both front legs back. I had to reach in, find the hooves, pull them forward one at a time. The heifer fought me, bellowing, and I talked to her the whole time, the way my father had taught me. Easy now, easy. We'll get through this, both of you. When the calf finally came, it came all at once, a rush of fluid and blood and life. The heifer staggered to her feet, turned to nose her baby, and I sat back in the straw covered in birth fluids, my shirt soaked, my hands trembling. Steam rose from the newborn calf as it took its first shaking breath. The barn door opened. Diane stood silhouetted in the doorway, snow swirling around her. She looked at me, at the calf, at the blood on the straw. Is it alive? She asked. Yeah, it's alive. Good. She turned to leave, then stopped. I'm leaving, Walt. I'm moving in with Kyle tomorrow. You can have your precious farm. I just want what I'm owed. The calf struggled to stand, legs shaking. Its mother licked it clean with long, patient strokes. You're not owed anything, I said quietly. She left without closing the door. I stood up, my knees creaking, and shut it against the storm. The next morning, her car was gone. I found her closet half empty, dresser drawers hanging open, the bathroom counter cleared of all the things that had been hers. She'd taken the good towels, the coffee maker I'd bought her for Christmas 3 years ago, and the quilt her mother had made us for our wedding. She'd left behind everything else. 32 years of accumulated life reduced to the things she didn't care enough to pack. I stood in the bedroom doorway for a long time, looking at the empty spaces. The house felt bigger somehow, and quieter, not peaceful quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you aware of every creak in the floorboards, every tick of the radiator. I made coffee in the old percolator I'd used before she came along, drank it black on the porch even though it was still below freezing. The sun was coming up over the tree line, turning the snow pink and gold. The newborn calf was doing well. I'd checked on her at 5, found her nursing strong. Life keeps moving forward whether you're ready or not. By noon, I was boxing up Diane's things, not out of anger, not out of spite, just because they needed to be moved, and I was the only one there to do it. I folded her clothes, carefully, the way you'd fold anything that deserved respect regardless of who owned it. I packed her books, her shoes, the framed photos of her family she'd kept on the dresser. In the back of her closet, I found the work gloves I'd given her on our wedding day, stuffed behind a stack of shoe boxes. They were stiff from disuse, the leather cracked at the seams. I'd had them custom made, the same style as mine, but smaller, with her initials burned into the cuff, DB. I turned them over in my hands, remembering how she'd cried when I gave them to her, said they were the most thoughtful gift anyone had ever given her. Partners in everything, she'd said, kissing me with tears on her cheeks. I set them aside gently, wrapped them in tissue paper, and put them in a separate box. When everything was packed, I carried it all out to the porch. 6 boxes, 2 suitcases, and a garment bag. I left a note on top. You can have your things, you can't have my land. Ray showed up around 2 with a truck bed full of fence posts and a thermos of coffee that was somehow worse than mine. Heard she left, he said, not quite looking at me. News travels fast. Margie Henderson saw her car at Kyle's apartment complex this morning. Wanted to make sure you knew. He poured coffee into 2 foam cups, handed me one. How you holding up? Still standing. We stood on the porch, drinking bad coffee, watching steam rise from the cups into the cold air. A crow called from somewhere in the back 40, and another answered. You need help with anything? Ray asked. Not yet, but I might. You know where to find me. He gestured at the boxes. She coming back for those? Eventually. Good. Means you can change the locks after she does. I almost smiled. Ray, I need to ask you something. The other farmers Kyle went after, Henderson, the others, did they see it coming? Not until it was too late. He's smart about it, friendly, helpful, always talking about wanting to support local agriculture. Then the contracts come out and the fine print buries him. Ray took a sip of coffee, made a face. Why? Because I want to know his pattern. I want to know how he operates. You thinking of going after him? I'm thinking of protecting myself. And maybe others while I'm at it. Ray pulled out his phone, scrolled for a minute, then showed me the screen. It was a business card. State Attorney General's Office, Agricultural Fraud Division. Guy named Peterson. He's been asking questions about Kyle for 6 months. Can't get enough people to file complaints, though. Everyone's too embarrassed or too scared. I took out my own phone, snapped a picture of the card. Thanks. Walt. Ray's voice dropped lower. You press this, it's going to get ugly. Diane's involved with him. That makes her involved in whatever he's been doing. I know. Just making sure you thought it through. I looked out at the fields, at the fence line that needed repair, at the barn where 4 generations of my family had worked and died. I've thought about nothing else. Ray left around 3. I spent the rest of the afternoon in the kitchen with every financial document I could find. Bank statements, loan papers, credit card bills, tax returns. Linda Chin had said to bring everything, and I was going to bring everything. What I found made my hands shake. $40,000 withdrawn from our joint savings in December. Another $25,000 taken as a cash advance on a credit card I didn't know existed. A second mortgage application, not approved yet, thank God, with my signature on it, except it wasn't my signature. Close, but not quite. The loop on the W was wrong. I spread the papers out on the kitchen table and photographed each one with my phone. Then I called Linda Chen. Mr. Brennan, she answered. I was just about to call you. I found something. So did I. Diane applied for a home equity line of credit last week. Used your information without authorization. The bank flagged it because the signature didn't match their records. She forged my name on a second mortgage application, too. Silence on the other end. Then, that's a felony, Walt. I know. If we report this, she could face criminal charges. Are you prepared for that? I thought about the work gloves wrapped in tissue paper. I thought about 32 years of marriage, of mornings drinking coffee together, of nights sitting on the porch watching lightning bugs. I thought about who she used to be, or who I thought she used to be. She made her choices, I said. I'm making mine. Bring me everything you found. Tomorrow morning, first thing. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table as the sun set, surrounded by paper evidence of betrayal. The house creaked and settled around me. I thought about pressing charges, about what that would mean, about whether mercy was weakness or strength. My phone buzzed. A text from Josie. Dad, you okay? I typed back, still here. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, good. I'm coming up this weekend. Going to help with fence repair. I looked out the window at the darkening sky. The boxes were still on the porch. She'd come for them eventually, but this land stayed where it was. Pastor Mitchell showed up on a Tuesday afternoon, driving his old Buick slow up the driveway like he was approaching a funeral. I was out by the machine shed, changing oil on the baler, and I saw him park and sit there for a minute, gathering himself. That's when I knew Diane had gotten to him first. He climbed out wearing his church clothes, khakis and a sweater vest, and walked over with his hands in his pockets. Walt, you got a few minutes? I wiped my hands on a rag. Sure. We walked to the house, and I made coffee while he sat at the kitchen table, looking at everything like he was cataloging it for later. The dishes in the sink, the mail stacked up, the general disorder of a man living alone who's got more important things to worry about than whether the counters are wiped down. I had a visit from Diane yesterday, he said when I set the coffee in front of him. She's concerned about you. Is she? She says you've been acting erratic, paranoid. She thinks the stress of the farm is affecting your judgment. He added cream to his coffee, stirred it slow. Walt, I've known you for 15 years. You've always been level-headed, solid. But I'm hearing things around town. What things? That you accused her of forging documents, that you're trying to cut her out of the property, that you threatened Kyle Masterson when he came to visit. He looked at me over his coffee cup. That's not the Walt Brennan I know. The wind rattled the kitchen window. Outside, clouds were building dark and heavy, the kind that meant more snow coming. Did she tell you about the baby? I asked. Yes. She's very excited. A little scared, but excited. He smiled. It's a blessing, Walt. A new life to bring you two together. It's not mine. The smile faded. What? The baby she's carrying. It's not mine. I had a vasectomy in 2009. Pastor Mitchell set his cup down carefully. Walt, are you sure? I'm sure. Medical records confirm it. The timeline confirms it. She knows it, I know it, and Kyle Masterson knows it. He sat back, and I watched him try to process this, watched his face go through the stages. Disbelief, confusion, something that might have been anger before he pushed it down into professional concern. Why didn't you tell me this before? Wasn't any of your business before? Walt. His voice took on that pastoral tone, gentle but firm. If this is true, then Diane needs support, not condemnation. She's made mistakes, yes, but we're called to forgive, to reconcile. Marriage is sacred. She forged my signature on loan documents, withdrew $40,000 without my knowledge. She's planning to sell this farm out from under me and pave it over for a truck stop. I pulled the folder of papers from the counter, set it in front of him. That's what your reconciliation looks like. He didn't open the folder, just looked at it like it might bite him. Even so, he said quietly, vengeance is the Lord's, not ours. You're angry, and you have a right to be, but destroying her won't heal you. I'm not trying to destroy her. I'm trying to protect what's mine. At what cost? He stood up, left his coffee barely touched. The church is watching this, Walt. People are taking sides, and right now, you're not making it easy for them to side with you. After he left, I sat at the table for a long time. The coffee went cold. The kitchen got darker as the clouds rolled in. I thought about church, about the years I'd served as an elder, taught Sunday school, showed up every week in clean clothes with my Bible underlined and highlighted. I thought about how quickly concerned becomes condemned when the story gets complicated. My phone rang. Ray. Walt, you near a computer? No. Why? Because I just got off the phone with Jim Peterson at the AG's office. They've been building a case against Kyle for 8 months. Predatory lending, elder fraud, contract manipulation. They've got 3 solid complaints, and they're looking for more. I stood up, started pacing. What do they need? Witnesses? documentation, people willing to testify. Ray paused. Walt, if Diane's been helping him, feeding him information about which farms are vulnerable, which farmers are struggling, she's an accessory. Peterson asked specifically about her. The snow started then, big flakes that stuck to the window. I watched them accumulate, thinking about how fast things could bury you if you weren't careful. When can I talk to him? He's driving up Thursday, wants to meet at the feed store, somewhere neutral. Says he's got questions about the other farmers too, the ones who didn't file complaints. Thinks maybe you knew them, could help piece together the pattern. I'll be there. One more thing, Ray's voice dropped. Margie Henderson saw Diane at Kyle's office this morning. She was carrying files, looked like farm records, property surveys. Thought you should know. After we hung up, I went to the window and watched the snow fall. It was coming down heavier now, coating everything in white, making the farm look clean and new and innocent, like you couldn't see all the work underneath, all the years of labor and sacrifice that went into every fence post and barn beam. 3 church ladies called that afternoon to check on me. Not one of them asked if Diane's story was true. They just wanted to know if I was seeking help and whether I'd considered the damage this was doing to my witness. I stopped answering the phone after the 3rd call. By evening, the snow was 6 inches deep. I went out to feed the cattle, broke ice on the water troughs, checked on the new calf and her mother. Everything was as it should be. The work didn't care about divorce or fraud or church politics. The work just needed doing. When I came back inside, there was a text from an unknown number. This is Jim Peterson, AG's office. Ray gave me your number. See you Thursday, 10 a.m., Tucker's Feed. Bring any documentation you have regarding Kyle Masterson's business practices. Thank you for your cooperation. I stood in the mudroom, snow melting off my boots, and typed back, I'll be there. The kitchen was dark except for the light over the stove. The house felt empty, but not in a bad way. More like it was waiting for something, like the quiet before spring, when the ground's still frozen, but you can feel the change coming underneath. Diane had picked the wrong partner, and I'd just found the right ally. Thursday came cold and clear, the kind of March morning where the sun's bright but gives no warmth. I drove into town with the folder of documents on the passenger seat, my father's work gloves on my hands even though the truck had heat. Old habits. Jim Peterson was already at Tucker's Feed when I arrived, sitting at the counter with Ray, drinking coffee from a foam cup. He was younger than I expected, maybe 45, with gray starting at his temples and the kind of tired eyes you get from seeing too much of people's worst. He stood when I came in, shook my hand. Mr. Brennan, thanks for meeting me. We moved to the back corner, away from the morning coffee crowd. Ray brought me a cup without asking, then went back to the counter to give us space. The store smelled like it always did, grain and oil and decades of the same conversations. Peterson opened a laptop, pulled out a legal pad. I've been investigating Kyle Masterson's business practices for 8 months. I've got 3 formal complaints, but I know there are more victims. People are afraid, or embarrassed, or both. Ray says you might be able to help me understand the pattern. I slid the folder across the table. Financial documents, forged signatures, unauthorized withdrawals. My wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, has been working with him. He opened the folder, started reading. His expression didn't change, but I saw his jaw tighten. When did you discover this? Couple weeks ago, started with an insurance beneficiary form, then I found the rest. And your wife is Diane Brennan? Yes. He pulled out a file from his briefcase, flipped through pages. She worked at First County Bank until 2018, is that right? Loan department? She was a loan officer for 12 years. Peterson made a note. That fits. We've been wondering how Masterson knew which farmers were vulnerable, who was carrying debt, who was behind on payments. Bank records are supposed to be confidential, but if he had someone feeding him information... He looked up at me. Mr. Brennan, I need to ask you something difficult. Do you believe your wife knowingly participated in fraud? I sat back, felt the hardwood of the chair against my spine. Outside, through the store window, I could see the sun reflecting off snow. Everything looked clean from a distance. I don't know, I said finally. Maybe she thought she was helping. Maybe she convinced herself these farmers were better off selling, that Kyle was doing them a favor. Or maybe she knew exactly what she was doing and didn't care. Which do you believe? I thought about the work gloves in the trash, about 32 years of marriage, About the woman who cried when I gave her those gloves and the woman who stood in the barn doorway, refusing to help save a dying calf. I think she wanted out, I said. Out of the farm, out of this life. And Kyle offered her a way. Whatever she had to do to get there, she did it. Peterson wrote for a long time. The only sounds were his pen on paper and the low murmur of conversation from the counter, the clink of coffee cups, the creak of the old floorboards when someone walked. I'm going to level with you, Peterson said, setting down his pen. What I've got here is enough to arrest Kyle Masterson today. Predatory lending, elder financial abuse, contract fraud. He's going to prison. But if your wife was actively feeding him information, using her banking knowledge to target victims, that makes her an accessory. She'd face charges, too. How many farmers did he hurt? That I can prove. 3 foreclosures, 2 forced sales, half a dozen predatory loans still active. That I suspect, maybe twice that. I picked up my coffee, held the cup between my hands, felt the warmth bleeding through the foam. My grandfather cleared this land in 1947, 4 generations, Peterson, and Kyle wanted to turn it into a parking lot for semi-trucks. I set the cup down. How many of those other farms were generational? All of them. I looked out the window again. An old farmer I knew, Carl Dietrich, had to be 80, was walking down the sidewalk slow, using a cane. I'd heard his grandson lost the family farm last year, some kind of equipment loan that went bad. Carl had that look people get when they've outlived the things they built. Do what you need to do, I said. Peterson closed his laptop. I'll need you to testify, both about your own case and about the pattern you've observed in the community. It won't be easy. Defense attorneys will come after your character, your marriage, your credibility. I've been through worse. And your wife will know you cooperated with the investigation. I thought about that for a moment, about Diane finding out that I hadn't just protected myself, I'd helped bring down the man she'd chosen over me, about the life she'd imagined in Arizona, the freedom she'd wanted, all of it disappearing into the legal system. She made her choices, I said. I'm making mine. Peterson stood, gathered his files. I'll be in touch. We'll need to schedule a formal interview, get everything on record. Could be a couple weeks. He left, and I sat there finishing my coffee. Ray came over, sat down across from me. You okay? He asked. Ask me in 6 months. Fair enough. He pulled out his keys, slid them across the table. That's to my cabin up by Lake Pepin. You need to get away for a weekend. It's yours. No questions. I looked at the keys, at my friend of 40 years, at the man who'd pulled me out of more than one bad situation since we came back from Vietnam. Thanks, Ray. What are friends for? I drove home slow, watching the farms pass by. Some prosperous, some struggling, all of them carrying the weight of someone's dream. When I pulled into my driveway, I saw boxes still sitting on the porch where I'd left them. Diane hadn't come for her things. Inside, the house was quiet. I made myself lunch, ate it standing at the counter, then went back out to work. The fence line on the back 40 had been waiting all winter. That night, sitting at the kitchen table with a plate of eggs and toast, I thought about what Peterson had asked me. Did I believe Diane knowingly participated in fraud? The honest answer was, I didn't know. Maybe I'd never know. People are complicated, and the line between being used and being complicit isn't always clear. What I did know was this. She'd chosen to walk through whatever doors Kyle opened, and I'd chosen to close mine. The courthouse hearing was scheduled for a Thursday in late April. Spring had finally come. Mud season, really. Everything thawing and messy and alive. The trees were budding, and you could smell wet earth instead of frozen ground. I drove to Eau Claire with Josie, both of us quiet, watching the landscape turn from white to brown, to the first hints of green. Linda Chin met us in the parking lot. She had a briefcase and a look that meant business. The paternity test results came back yesterday. Kyle Masterson is the biological father, 99.7% certainty. Josie let out a breath she'd been holding. I just nodded. Diane's attorney filed a motion to dismiss the fraud charges, Linda continued as we walked toward the courthouse. Claims she had verbal permission for the withdrawals, that the signature discrepancies are due to your declining motor function. My motor function's fine. I know. We've got your doctor's statement. We've also got the bank's handwriting analysis. She pulled open the heavy door. The smell of the courthouse hit me, floor wax and old wood and the particular scent of legal proceedings. This is going to be difficult, Walt. Are you ready? As I'll ever be. As I'll ever. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, an American flag in the corner. There was a gallery in the back, maybe 20 seats, and it was half full. Ray was there, sitting in the front row, Josie's ex-husband, surprisingly, supporting her, a few people from church who'd taken my side. And in the back, 3 men I recognized. Henderson, whose farm Kyle had taken, and 2 others who'd lost land to predatory loans. Diane sat at the defendant's table with her attorney, a young man who looked fresh out of law school and kept shuffling papers like he'd lost something important. She wore a blue dress and her hair was done up nice, and when she glanced back at me, her face was pale, her hands clasped tight in her lap. Kyle wasn't there. Linda had told me he'd been arrested the day before. Federal charges, separate case. The AG's office had moved fast once they had my testimony and the documents. The judge was a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and reading glasses on a chain. She looked over the file, looked at both tables, and said, Let's proceed. Linda presented first. She walked the judge through the timeline, the insurance beneficiary change, the bank withdrawals, the attempted second mortgage, the forged signatures. She had documents for everything, blown up on poster boards so the whole courtroom could see. Each one was dated, authenticated, damning. Then she brought me to the stand. Mr. Brennan, she said, her voice clear and professional, when did you first discover that your wife had changed the insurance beneficiary on your farm policy? January 14th. Found the form in her desk drawer. And had you authorized this change? No, ma'am. What about the $40,000 withdrawn from your joint savings account in December? Did you authorize that withdrawal? No, ma'am. She walked me through each document, each forged signature, each unauthorized action. Her questions were precise, leaving no room for interpretation. When she asked about the vasectomy, I stated the facts, date of the procedure, medical necessity, the impossibility of paternity, without emotion, just the truth, plain and simple. Diane's attorney cross-examined me, trying to suggest I was confused, that we'd discussed these financial decisions and I'd forgotten, that my age was affecting my memory. Linda objected twice. The judge sustained both times, looking at the young attorney over her glasses like he was wasting everyone's time. When they called Diane to the stand, she took it slowly, one hand on her stomach. She was showing now, maybe 4 months along. She swore on the Bible, sat down, and her attorney asked her to explain her side. I was trying to protect our future, she said, her voice soft, apologetic. Walt's getting older. He's stubborn about accepting help. I thought if I managed the finances, made some decisions that needed making, I could secure us both. The farm's too much for him now, but he won't admit it. And the pregnancy? Her attorney asked. It's Walt's baby. He's confused about the timeline, about the medical procedure. He had some minor surgery years ago, but it wasn't... Her voice caught. I would never betray him like he's suggesting. Linda stood. Objection. The medical records are clear and authenticated. This is perjury. The judge looked at Diane for a long moment. Ms. Chen, you have the paternity test results? Yes, Your Honor. Submit them. The bailiff took the envelope from Linda, passed it to the judge. She opened it, read the single page inside, and her expression didn't change, but something shifted in the room. You could feel it, like the air getting heavier. Mrs. Brennan, the judge said, the paternity test confirms that Kyle Masterson is the biological father of the child you're carrying. The probability of paternity is 99.7%. She set the paper down. Would you like to revise your testimony? Diane's face crumpled. Her attorney put a hand on her arm, whispered something. She shook her head, started crying, and the judge called a recess. We stood in the hallway while Diane and her attorney conferred in a side room. Ray brought me coffee from a vending machine. It tasted like hot water that had once seen a coffee bean from a great distance. How you doing? He asked. Still standing. Josie paced by the window, checking her phone, looking out at the parking lot. Dad, whatever happens in there, you did the right thing. Doesn't always feel like it. Doing the right thing usually doesn't. 20 minutes later, we filed back in. Diane's attorney stood. Your Honor, my client would like to propose a settlement. The judge gestured for him to continue. Mrs. Brennan acknowledges that the marriage is irretrievably broken. She's willing to relinquish all claims to the farm property in exchange for $50,000 and her personal vehicle. She also requests that Mr. Brennan not press criminal charges for the financial discrepancies. Linda looked at me. The judge looked at me. The whole courtroom looked at me. I thought about mercy and justice, about 32 years of marriage and $40,000 of theft. I thought about my grandfather clearing land with a mule and my father teaching me to fix fences in blizzards. I thought about the work gloves and tissue paper, about the woman who'd cried when I gave them to her. I'll agree to the settlement, so I said. On one condition, she cooperates fully with the Attorney General's investigation into Kyle Masterson's business practices. Every piece of information she has, every conversation, every document, full cooperation. Diane's attorney whispered to her. She nodded, wiping her eyes. Agreed, he said. The judge made it official. Papers were signed, filed, stamped. Just like that, 32 years ended with the sound of a gavel on wood. As we left the courtroom, I passed Henderson in the hallway. He grabbed my arm. Peterson called me this morning, said Kyle's looking at 10 years, maybe more, said your testimony made the case. His eyes were wet. My grandson might get the farm back, Walt, because of you. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. Outside, the April sun was warm on my face. The parking lot was full of puddles reflecting blue sky. Josie walked beside me, and Ray met us at the truck. It's done, I said. Not quite, Linda said, coming up behind us. She handed me a folder. Jim Peterson asked me to give you this. Kyle Masterson was formally arrested this morning. Federal charges, elder financial abuse, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, 3 counts on each, and Diane's cooperation means they can trace the pattern back 6 years. They're expecting at least 8 more victims to come forward. I opened the folder. Inside was a list of names. Farmers I knew, some I didn't. Each one with a case number, a brief description of how they'd been targeted, how much they'd lost. At the bottom, Peterson had written a note in pen. Mr. Brennan, your courage to come forward saved these families. Thank you for your service to your community. J.P. He also wanted me to tell you something, Linda said. The dealership's assets are being seized. Once the criminal restitution is calculated, victims will be compensated. Won't make them whole, but it's something. Ray let out a low whistle. Walt Brennan, crime fighter. I just wanted my farm back. You got that. And you stopped a predator. Not bad for a week's work. We stood there in the parking lot, the 4 of us, while the world went about its business around us. Cars coming and going, people walking to and from the courthouse with their own dramas and disasters. Spring wind carrying the smell of rain coming later. What now? Josie asked. I looked at my daughter, at the friend who'd stood by me for 40 years, at the attorney who'd fought for justice when it would have been easier to just split everything down the middle and walk away. Now we go home, I said. Got fence posts to plant. 2 weeks later, on a Saturday morning when the ground had finally dried enough to work, Josie showed up with Michael in a truck bed full of fence posts. The May sun was warm, the kind that makes you believe winter's really over this time. Birds were singing, robins and red-winged blackbirds, and you could smell green things growing, that particular scent of spring that's half mud and half hope. Michael jumped out of the truck wearing work boots and a flannel shirt that was too big for him, probably one of Josie's from when she was young. Grandpa, Mom says I get to help with the fence today. That's so, I looked at Josie. She was wearing work gloves. Not the ones from the attic, but new ones, brown leather, that still had that stiff look of never having been broken in. Figured it was time, she said. He's old enough to learn. We loaded the post hole digger and tamping bar into the ATV, drove out to the back 40 where the winter had taken down a section of fence. The posts were weathered gray, leaning like old men tired of standing. The wire was rusted and sagging. Why do we have to fix it? Michael asked, looking at the fence like it was the most boring thing in the world. I knelt down next to him, put my hand on one of the leaning posts. Because a fence is a promise. It says this is mine, and I take care of what's mine. Your great-great-grandfather put up the first fence on this land in 1947. Your great-grandfather maintained it. I've maintained it. And someday, you'll maintain it too. But why? Because the land doesn't belong to us, son. We belong to it. We're just taking care of it until it's time to pass it on. He thought about that, his face serious. Then, is that why Grandma Diane left? Because she didn't want to take care of it? Josie started to say something, but I held up a hand. Your Grandma Diane wanted different things. That's okay. People want what they want. But this land, this needs people who'll fight for it, who'll get up at 4 a.m. when it's below 0 and the pipes are frozen, who'll stay up all night with a calf that's breech, who'll fix fence even when they're tired and their back hurts and they could be doing something easier. I can do that, Michael said. I believe you can. We spent the morning pulling old posts, digging new holes, setting fresh cedar posts deep and true. I showed Michael how to tamp the dirt, how to check that the post was plumb, how to string wire tight enough to sing when you plucked it. His hands were small on the tools, but he worked hard, never complained. Josie worked beside us, and I watched her move through the tasks with the easy confidence of someone who'd grown up doing this work. She'd been away for years, college, vet school, marriage to a man who didn't understand why anyone would choose farming, but the knowledge was still there, in her hands, in the way she knew, without asking where things needed to go. Around noon, we took a break, sat in the ATV's shade, drank water from a cooler. The fence stretched behind us, new posts standing straight and strong. Michael lay in the grass looking up at clouds. "That one looks like a cow," he said, pointing. "Which one?" "That one. See the horns?" I looked up. "I see it." Josie pulled something from her pocket, the work gloves I'd found in the attic, the ones that had been her grandmother's. She'd had them repaired, the leather cleaned and conditioned. She held them up to the light. "Mom would have liked this," she said quietly. Seeing her grandson learning the farm. Yeah, she would have. Think Diane will ever understand what she gave up? I watched Michael in the grass, content and tired and exactly where he needed to be. Probably not, but that's not our problem anymore. We finished the fence line by mid-afternoon. The last post went in clean and straight, and Michael got to hammer it home, each strike of the sledge landing true. When it was done, we stood back and looked at our work. A quarter mile of new fence, the wire tight, the posts level. "Looks good," Josie said. "Looks like family," I said. That evening, after they'd gone home, I sat on the porch with coffee and watched the sun set over the fields. The cattle were grazing peaceful, the new calves running in circles the way young things do when they're testing out their legs. The barn stood solid and square, 4 generations of work holding it upright. My phone buzzed. A text from Ray. Henderson got his farm back. Restitution came through. His grandson's moving back next month to work it. Thought you should know. I typed back, "Well, wish good." Then another text, this one from Jim Peterson. Masterson pleaded guilty to all counts. 12 years federal prison, 8 families getting restitution, justice served. Thank you for your courage. I set the phone down and looked out at the land. 280 acres of Wisconsin dirt that had been fought for, worked for, nearly lost, and finally saved. Not by anger or revenge, but by standing firm when it would have been easier to let go. The sun touched the horizon, painting everything gold and pink. A breeze came up, carrying the smell of fresh-turned soil from the field Josie and I would plant next week. Spring had come late this year, but it had come. I thought about Diane, wherever she was, about Kyle in a federal prison counting years, about the farmers who'd lost their land and the ones who'd gotten it back, about mistakes and choices and the difference between the two. Then I stood up, poured the rest of my coffee on the porch plants, they liked the acidity, and walked out to the barn to check on the animals one last time before dark. Tomorrow I'd start planting. The day after, Josie was bringing Michael back to learn how to drive the tractor. The week after that, Ray and I were fixing the barn roof. The work never stopped. But neither did the land. And that, I thought, walking into the barn's warm darkness was exactly how it should be. The morning after planting, I woke before dawn out of habit and made coffee the old way, watching it percolate on the stove, while the sky turned from black to gray to that pale blue that promises a clear day. The house was quiet, but it wasn't the hollow quiet of those first weeks after Diane left. It was the peaceful kind. The kind that comes when you finally stopped waiting for something to change and started accepting what is. I took my coffee out to the porch. The fields were dark shapes in the pre-dawn light, but I knew every contour, every low spot that held water, every rise where the soil was sandy. My grandfather had known them too, and his father before him. Now Josie knew them and Michael was learning. A robin called from the oak tree by the barn. Another answered from somewhere in the back 40. The first birds of morning, singing because that's what birds do when the sun comes up. I thought about what I'd tell someone if they asked me what I'd learned from all this. Not wisdom exactly, just things that turned out to be true. A man doesn't own land. He borrows it from his grandchildren, and his job is to hand it back better than he found it. Marriage is supposed to be 2 people pulling in the same direction. When one person lets go of the rope, you can't pull for both. Mercy and justice aren't opposites. Sometimes mercy is just making sure justice doesn't turn cruel. The work saves you. When everything else is falling apart, the work is still there. Cattle need feeding, fences need mending, land needs tending. The work doesn't care about your heartbreak. It just needs doing. The sun broke over the tree line, spilling gold across the pasture. The cattle were already moving toward the gate, knowing I'd be there soon with feed. From the barn came the low of the new mother cow, checking on her calf. I finished my coffee, stood up, felt my knees creak and my back complain, and ignored both, because that's what you do when you're 67 and there's work waiting. I pulled on my father's old work gloves, 40 years old now, patched at the thumbs and worn smooth at the palms, and walked down the porch steps into the morning. Behind me, the house stood quiet and waiting. Ahead, the barn door was open, light spilling out into the dawn, and all around, stretching as far as I could see, was land that had survived droughts and floods and the Great Depression and a woman who'd wanted to sell it for parts. It was still here. I was still here. And tomorrow, Josie and Michael would be here too. That was enough. More than enough. That was everything.